When we talk about seeking God first, we're not merely talking about a casual acknowledgement of his presence in our lives. We're speaking about making a conscious, deliberate decision to prioritize him above everything else. It's about making God the foundation of every thought, every decision, and every action. It's about saying that no matter what happens around me, no matter what life throws at me, my first thought is to seek his will. We live in a world that constantly pulls us in different directions. The pressures of work, the demands of family, the pursuit of success, and the desire for comfort and pleasure all compete for our attention. But in the middle of this hustle, the question we must ask ourselves is, where does God rank in all of this? Seeking God first is not a passive process. It doesn't just happen on its own. It requires a level of intentionality, a decision to turn our hearts and minds toward him first thing in the morning before we even start our day. It means giving him the first part of our time, the first part of our energy, and the first part of our thoughts. When we prioritize God in this way, everything else falls into place. Our priorities start to align with his. The chaos of the world begins to quiet down, and we find ourselves walking in the peace and purpose that only comes from him. But what does it mean to truly seek God first? It means that when we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is lift our eyes to heaven, thanking God for a new day and asking him to lead us through it. It means we open our Bibles and listen to what he's speaking to us through his word, because we understand that his word is life, and it's the guide that leads us through every trial and challenge. It's about making space in our busy lives to commune with him in prayer, to hear his voice, and to align our will with his. In seeking God first, we're not just looking for solutions to our problems. We're not seeking him because we want something from him. We're seeking him because we understand that he is the source of all things good. He is our provision, our protector, and our guide. When we put God first, we acknowledge that everything else in life flows from him. We recognize that our success, our relationships, and our peace of mind are not dependent on our own efforts, but on God's grace and favor. And when we live with that understanding, we live in a place of surrender. In seeking God first, we're also declaring our trust in him. We're saying, God, I believe that your ways are better than my ways. I trust that you know what's best for me. It's a statement of faith that says, I might not understand why things are happening the way they are, but I trust that you are in control. This is where true peace comes from, when we let go of the need to control every outcome and trust that God has a plan for us that is far greater than anything we could imagine. When we seek God first, everything else begins to fall into place. We start to make decisions based on his wisdom, not our own. Our hearts begin to break for what breaks his heart, and we begin to see the world through his eyes. We stop chasing after temporary things and start investing in eternal things. And as we seek God first, he promises that all the other things we need will be added to us. It's a divine exchange. We give him our hearts, our time, our lives, and he gives us everything we need. When we choose to seek God first, we are making a profound declaration of trust. Trust is not something that comes easily, especially in a world filled with uncertainty and shifted circumstances. But when we put God first, we are saying, Lord, I trust you with my life. It's a trust that goes beyond surface level assurances. It's a deep-rooted belief that God has a perfect plan for us, even when the road ahead seems unclear. Trusting God's plan means we surrender our own desires and ambitions and allow him to lead us in ways we may not fully understand. This trust is not about blind faith. It's about confidence in God's character. It's about knowing that the God who created us, the God who loves us unconditionally, is also the God who holds our future. His plans are not meant to harm us, but to give us hope and a future. When we seek him first, we acknowledge that his ways are higher than ours, his thoughts are beyond our understanding, and his timing is perfect. There may be moments when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are, but in those moments we lean into our trust in him. We trust that he is working everything out for our good, even when we can't see the end of the story. When we trust God's plan, it shifts our perspective. Instead of worrying about what might happen, we learn to rest in his promises. We stop trying to control every situation and let go of the need to have everything figured out. This doesn't mean that challenges won't come. It doesn't mean that we won't face hardships. But it does mean that when we face those challenges, we don't face them alone. We face them with the assurance that God is with us, that he is guiding us, and that he is always at work behind the scenes, orchestrating things in our favor. Trusting God's plan also means waiting on his timing. We live in a world that thrives on instant gratification, but God's timing is not always immediate. He knows exactly when to move, when to act, and when to hold us in place. Sometimes we may feel impatient, as though we're ready to move ahead, but God knows what we need before we even ask. He knows what is best for us, and he will bring it to pass in his perfect time. And in the waiting, we learn to grow in faith, to build our patience, and to rely on his strength. In moments of doubt, trusting God's plan means reminding ourselves of his faithfulness. When we look back over our lives, we can see the ways he has led us, provided for us, and protected us. These moments are reminders that he is always faithful, even when we don't see the full picture. It's in those memories that we find the courage to trust him with our future. So when we seek God first and trust his plan, we are not just following a set of rules or guidelines. We are placing our lives in the hands of a loving, all-knowing God who wants the best for us. We choose to believe that even in the midst of uncertainty, his plan for us is unfolding in ways we can't yet comprehend. And as we trust his plan, we begin to experience peace that surpasses all understanding, knowing that he is in control and that his plan is always for our good. When we seek God first, one of the most incredible blessings we experience is a peace that the world cannot give. In a world that constantly bombards us with chaos, fear, and uncertainty, this peace is like an anchor for our souls. It is a peace that transcends our circumstances, that doesn't rely on the smoothness of the road or the comfort of our surroundings. It is a peace that comes from the presence of God, a peace that settles deep within our hearts when we prioritize him above all else. We all know that life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges at us. Problems in relationships, financial struggles, health issues, these are all parts of the human experience. And when these things hit us, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and uncertain. But when we seek God first, we invite his peace into the midst of those storms. We choose to focus on his power, his love, and his faithfulness instead of the size of the problem before us. When we focus on God, we shift our perspective. The challenges we face may not disappear, but they no longer have the same grip on us. We start to see them through the lens of God's ability to handle all things. There's a certain comfort that comes with knowing that we don't have to face life's difficulties alone. The peace that comes from seeking God first is not just an emotional calmness, it's a deep assurance that he is with us, that he is in control, and that he is working everything together for our good. This peace is rooted in trust. When we know that God is sovereign and that he loves us with an unshakable love, we can face whatever comes with a sense of calm. We don't have to be afraid because we know that he who is for us is greater than anything that stands against us. This peace is not dependent on outward circumstances. It doesn't depend on whether everything is going smoothly or whether we have everything we want. It comes from a deeper place, a place of knowing that our security and hope are not tied to things that are temporary. The peace that God offers is a peace that holds steady even when the world is shaking. It's a peace that helps us remain calm in the storm, trusting that God's presence is enough to carry us through. In seeking God first, we also experience peace in our minds. The Bible tells us that when we keep our minds fixed on God, he will keep us in perfect peace. The anxiety and worry that often grip us are the result of focusing too much on ourselves and the situations around us. But when we seek God first, we are reminded that He is the one who holds the future, that He is the one who has a plan for us, and that His plan is always for our good. This shift in focus brings a peace that calms our racing thoughts and settles our hearts. And as we seek God, we discover that His peace is not just for ourselves, it overflows into our relationships, our work, and every part of our lives. When we walk in peace, we become agents of peace in the world around us. Our peace becomes a testimony to others of the power and presence of God in our lives. Seeking God first leads us to a peace that is beyond anything the world can offer. It's a peace that comes from knowing that God is in control, that He has our best interest at heart, and that no matter what happens, He will never leave us. This peace transforms us, and it changes the way we approach every situation in life. It's a peace that stays with us even in the most challenging times. When we seek God first, we open ourselves up to the revelation of our true purpose in life. This world has a way of pushing us to define ourselves by things that are temporary, our jobs, our status, our possessions. But when we make the decision to prioritize God above everything else, we begin to see ourselves through His eyes. We stop living by the world's standards and start living according to the higher calling that God has placed on our lives. And in doing so, we begin to walk in a purpose that is far greater than we could have ever imagined for ourselves. The beauty of seeking God first is that it helps us align our desires with His will. Many times we chase after things that may seem important in the moment, but they don't carry eternal significance. Seeking God brings clarity to our purpose. It gives us the ability to discern what truly matters. We begin to see that our value is not found in what we do or what we have, but in who we are in Christ. When we place God first, He begins to reveal to us the purpose for which we were created, and we find that our true fulfillment comes from walking in that purpose. Walking in purpose is not always about big dramatic changes. Sometimes it's in the small everyday decisions that we align ourselves with God's will. It's in the way we serve others, the way we lead our families, the way we handle our work. It's about understanding that every moment, no matter how small, holds eternal value when it is done in alignment with God's purpose. This understanding shifts the way we approach life. It removes the pressure to perform and pleases the world, and instead it brings us back to the truth that our purpose is rooted in God's plan. When we live according to God's purpose, we live with intention. We no longer wander aimlessly, chasing after things that lead nowhere. Instead, we walk with conviction, knowing that every step we take is in alignment with the Creator's plan. This brings a deep sense of satisfaction because we are no longer living for ourselves. We are living for something greater than our own ambitions. We are living for God's glory. Seeking God first also reveals to us that our purpose is bigger than our individual lives. It's not just about us, it's about how God can use us to impact the lives of others. Our purpose is tied to His kingdom, and as we step into that purpose, we become vessels through which God can bring His love, His hope, and His peace to the world. This perspective changes everything. It means that our work, our relationships, and our every action have eternal significance. We are no longer just going through the motions of life, we are living with purpose, knowing that God is using us to make a difference in His world. In the process of seeking God first, we come to understand that our purpose is not always what we expect it to be. Sometimes it's not about the titles or the accolades, but about being faithful in the quiet, unseen moments. It's about serving others, being a light in dark places, and trusting God with the unfolding of our story. And as we walk in this purpose, we find that true fulfillment is not found in success or recognition, but in the peace that comes from knowing we are walking in God's plan for our lives. So when we seek God first, we don't just discover our purpose, we discover a life of meaning and significance that goes far beyond anything this world could offer. We find fulfillment not in what we achieve, but in who we are becoming as we align our lives with God's will. And that, my friends, is a purpose that lasts for eternity. When we seek God first, we step into a journey of spiritual growth and strength that transforms every part of our being. It's easy to be deceived into thinking that strength comes from our own efforts or from the circumstances around us. But true strength is not about what we can do in our own power. It's about the power of God working through us. When we place God at the center of our lives, he begins to build in us a strength that is not dependent on external factors, but on his presence and his word. The first thing that happens as we seek God first is that we begin to grow spiritually. It's like a seed being planted in the soil. It starts off small, but with the right environment, it grows into something strong and fruitful. The more we seek God through prayer, through his word, and through time spent in his presence, the more our spirits are nourished and strengthened. Our faith grows not because we are striving to be stronger, but because we are allowing God to pour his strength into us. It's a process of surrender, letting go of our own efforts and trusting that he will do the work in us. As we grow spiritually, we also begin to develop a deeper understanding of God's character. We start to see that his ways are higher than ours, that his love is unfailing, and that his wisdom is beyond measure. This understanding of God's nature deepens our relationship with him and strengthens our faith. The more we know God, the more we realize that he is the source of all strength. It's through knowing him that we become secure, knowing that whatever challenges we face, he is more than able to bring us through. Spiritual growth also gives us the strength to overcome adversity. Life is full of challenges, and it's easy to become discouraged when things don't go as planned. But when we seek God first, we discover that our strength is not limited by what we see or feel in the moment. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. This means that in the very areas where we feel the most inadequate, God can show up and provide us with the strength we need. It's in those moments of struggle that we experience his power in ways we never could on our own. We don't have to rely on our own abilities to get through difficult times. We can lean on God's strength, which never fails. Another aspect of spiritual strength is the ability to stand firm in our faith no matter the circumstances. When we seek God first, we become more rooted in his truth. The storms of life may come, but we won't be shaken. The winds may blow, but we will stand strong because our foundation is built on the solid rock of God's word. Seeking God first equips us with the strength to endure, to persevere, and to remain faithful, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. Moreover, as we grow spiritually and gain strength, we become more equipped to help others. The strength we receive from God is not just for us, it is meant to flow through us to those around us. We become vessels of encouragement, lifting up others with the same strength that God has given us. We learn to be patient with others, to show grace, and to offer hope because we know what it feels like to be strengthened by God in our own times of need. The more we seek God, the more we experience his transformative power in our lives. We move from weakness to strength, from fear to courage, from doubt to unwavering faith. And as we grow spiritually, we become more of who God created us to be: strong, faithful, and capable of facing whatever comes our way with his strength in us. But seeking God first is not just a one-time decision, but a lifelong journey that continually builds us up, making us stronger, more resilient, and more rooted in our faith. Through this journey, we learn that the strength we need doesn't come from ourselves, but from the all-sufficient God who is always with us. When we seek God first, we experience a transformation that not only impacts our lives, but overflows into the lives of those around us. This is not a transformation that happens in isolation. It is meant to touch and change the world. As we prioritize God, our lives become a living testimony of his grace, love, and power. And as we grow in our relationship with him, we begin to reflect his character in the way we live, speak, and interact with others. The first area where this transformation is evident is in our relationships. When we seek God first, we begin to see others through his eyes. Instead of looking at people with judgment or frustration, we start to see them with compassion. We understand that they too are walking their own journeys, and we become more patient, kind, and understanding. Our hearts soften as we reflect God's love for them. This change in perspective leads to healthier relationships rooted in grace and mutual respect, because we are not just seeing people for who they are, but for who God has called them to be. We no longer try to change others to meet our expectations. We begin to encourage them in the process of becoming who God has created them to be. Furthermore, seeking God first transforms the way we handle conflicts. In the past, we may have reacted impulsively or allowed our emotions to dictate our actions. But as we grow in our relationship with God, we learn to respond with wisdom and humility. We seek peace, understanding, and reconciliation instead of fueling the fire of anger or division. The Holy Spirit works within us to give us the strength to forgive when we've been wronged, and the wisdom to know when to speak and when to remain silent. This transformation doesn't just affect our personal relationships, but extends to every area of life where conflict arises. As we seek God, we also begin to experience a deeper sense of purpose in our work and daily tasks. Our jobs, our service, our everyday responsibilities take on new meaning. We understand that everything we do, whether big or small, is an opportunity to glorify God and to serve others. Whether we are working in an office, running a business, taking care of our families, or volunteering in our communities, we see these actions as part of God's plan for our lives. We stop seeing our work as just a means to an end, but as a way to reflect God's love and purpose in the world. This shift in mindset brings fulfillment and joy because we know that everything we do has eternal significance. Seeking God first also brings transformation in the way we view our challenges and trials. Life is full of difficulties, but when we place God at the center of our lives, we begin to see our struggles as opportunities for growth. We no longer let the weight of our problems overwhelm us. Instead, we learn to lean on God's strength, trusting that he is using our challenges to shape us into the people he has called us to be. The transformation that happens within us during these times is what enables us to be a source of strength and encouragement to others who are facing similar struggles. Finally, the transformation we experience when we seek God first is not just for ourselves, it has a ripple effect that touches the lives of those around us. As we live according to God's will, others are drawn to the hope, peace, and love that we radiate. Our transformed lives become a living testimony of the power of God to change hearts and minds. We become a beacon of light in a dark world, showing others the way to the hope and freedom found in Christ. Seeking God first is not just a personal choice, it is a call to be a part of a larger purpose. As we grow, change, and reflect God's love, we become agents of transformation in the world around us. Our lives, shaped by God's presence, have the power to impact others, leading them to the same hope and transformation that we have experienced. The more we seek God, the more we become his hands and feet, spreading his love, joy, and peace to a world that desperately needs it.